Okay, welcome back to our series on AP Statistics. Today we're going to be looking at section 1 in Chapter 4, and this is the fourth day of Section 4.1. And we're going to be looking at different kind of biases that you might see in different surveys. Now, this is a pretty common kind of question that you're going to see on the AP test, where you will see a survey and you'll have to say what kind of a bias and whether or not that bias is going to overestimate or underestimate. Okay, here we go with some interesting graphics, and we have the mayor of Springfield is interested in finding out the average age of people in the city. So he obtains a list of all the landline for telephones in the city, and then he contacts a simple random sample of 300 people. He uses the data from that sample to estimate the average age of people in the city. Now, this sounds like a pretty reasonable design. We're using an SRS, so you might think that this is okay. However, we're only doing landlines. So if you think about the phone that's probably in your pocket, that's not going to reach you because it's not a landline. This is going to be an example of an undercoverage or an undercoverage bias. When the design of our survey does not reach the entire population, then that's what we mean by undercoverage. We talked a lot about that, or at least a little bit about that, when we were doing our Taylor Swift Statsmetics on our previous days. This survey is going to undercover the population because younger people, mostly younger people, often don't have a landline television, a telephone. Most of the time, younger people will just have a cell phone. And since a cell phone is not a landline, they will not be included in the survey. So because of the design of the survey, a significant portion of the population will never be part of this survey. How about, do you think that the mayor is going to over or underestimate the true mean age in Springfield? And remember, we were saying that a significant portion of younger people are not going to be in the survey. Since younger people are undercovered in the design, that means that the survey is going to overestimate the true mean age of people in Springfield. Okay, so that's undercoverage bias. When a portion of the population is systematically not included in the sample. All right, moving on to question 2. The administration at a school wants to know the proportion of students that did all of their homework last night. So they select a simple random sample of 100 students and send an email to each of them asking if they did their homework last night. Of the 40 responses, 36 of the students said that they did all of their homework last night. Now, only 40 of the 100 students contacted responded. So that's less than half of the random sample responded. A bias that can be thought about here is going to be a non-response bias. And very simply, this means that if everybody who did not respond somehow responded in the same way, which is unlikely but still a possibility, then does that have the possibility of reversing the results of the survey from the people who did respond? So in this one, we've got 36 of the 40, 90%, said that they did their homework, so the administration might want to go and publish that 90% of the students did their homework last night. Well, what if all 60 of those students who didn't respond, what if they all said they did not do their homework? Okay, well, in doing a little bit of quick math, 60 non-respondents say they did not do their homework. 4 of the respondents said they didn't do their homework. So actuality, there is a possibility that 64% of the students in the random sample did not do their homework. That reverses the results of the previous survey, or the respondents, because now we have more than half of the students possibly did not do their homework. So we need to make sure that if we're going to do a survey and there is going to be non-response biases or a non-response, that the number of non-respondents will not reverse the results of the respondent, the people who did respond. Do you think the administration is going to over or underestimate the true proportion of students who did their homework last night? Well, I think it's pretty clear that the administration is going to overestimate the true proportion of students who did their homework, since it's very likely that the students who did not respond, they probably didn't do their homework either, or at least a significant portion of those non-respondents did not do their homework. Also, another thing to think about here is that the students who didn't do their homework, they probably don't want to be, outed as non-homework people to the administration. So there's a couple of things wrong with this. And that's our little bit on non-response bias. Moving on to this Boy Scout problem with Peter M. Peter M. wants to know the proportion of people in his neighborhood who support the Boy Scouts. So he's going to take a random sample of 30 homes and he's going to visit them and he's going to wear his uniform. Well, why not? I mean, he is doing a Boy Scout survey and he wants to identify as Boy Scout or as a Boy Scout. Actually, this is a problem, and this is going to produce a response bias. A response bias means that the design of the study is going to favor one of the outcomes. So respondents are going to feel uncomfortable telling him that they do not support the Scouts because he's going to be dressed as a Scout. They probably don't want to, I don't know what the word's going to be here. I guess we could say they don't want to hurt Peter's feelings because, he is a Scout and you're going to be directly telling someone that you don't support them. So Peter's influence or Peter's appearance is going to influence the outcome. And this is important. It's going to influence the outcomes in a clear and consistent manner. Notice that I'm trying not to say that they're going to lie. We'll talk about the whole lying business in a few minutes. So, since Peter's appearance is going to influence the outcomes in a clear and consistent manner, this is a response bias. This is going to be an overestimation, or Peter's going to overestimate the true proportion of neighbors who support the Boy Scouts. And again, we said that the people who responded are less likely to say that they do not support the Boy Scouts, because that would mean that they're also going to tell Peter to his face that they don't support him. And finally, I want everyone to be careful when you're saying they could be lying and calling that a source of bias. And while it's true that people could lie or falsify their opinions it's not really going to be a source of bias, or at least we can't call it a source of bias unless there's clear and consistent direction to that lie. In any survey, there's no real way to account for lying respondents, or respondents who are falsifying their responses. So it's really difficult to say that in this case it is, in this case it's not a bias. There has to be that clear, consistent direction to that lying or that falsification before we can call it a source of bias. So that was very quick. Here are the three different biases, or the three main biases that we're going to be concerning ourselves with. Number one, undercoverage. Some members of the population cannot or are drastically less likely to be chosen. They would be not, their opinion would not be represented in the sample. So that's an undercoverage. Non-response bias is when an individual is selected to be in the sample but chooses not to participate. This is only really a problem if the non-respondents have the opportunity to reverse the outcome of the survey. Okay. Now, this is a little different than the voluntary responses, and the only way to deal with this non-response bias is to, number one, make sure that the non-respondents have no possibility of reversing the outcome. And number two, if the non-respondents can still overturn the outcome, then you want to follow up on the non-responses. Simply taking another sample is never going to do anything. It's not going to overcome that non-response bias. And finally, there's a response bias, and this is a pattern of inaccurate responses. Okay, it could be due to the wording of the question. Sometimes it's due to the interviewer, the appearance of the interviewer. And then we talked about lying. And remember that unless there's a clear and consistent direction to all the lies, then we can't call it a bias. Okay, the last part of this is going to be our check your understanding, and we're going to take a look at a few different things, and we're going to identify all of the following are going to have a possible source of bias. We're going to name the bias that could result. So starting with this first one, a sample is chosen at random from a telephone directory. I don't think we have a whole lot of telephone directories anymore. Pretty soon this is going to be an obsolete kind of a question, but it used to be a telephone directory would have a list of all of the phone numbers in use and who the phone numbers go to. People could opt not to be included in a phone book, and so those people are called unlisted. So if there are any unlisted people in the phone book, they're going to be underrepresented in the sample. And depending on what the survey is asking, all those underrepresented or unlisted people might be important to the survey. Next, some people cannot be contacted in 5 calls. Well, now we're going into a non-response bias. Some of the people cannot be reached, or which is another way of saying that they are not responding. So if there's a reason why they cannot be reached, and if that's linked to the response variable, that is going to cause a bias. And remember, all of these, unless it's linked to the response, it may or may not be a bias, but it's definite warning flag if these reasons are linked to the responses. Next, what about interviewers choosing people on the sidewalk to interview? Well, that's not a great idea. That would be a convenience sample because we're only getting people who are easier to reach. If that location is again linked to the response variable, that is going to be a bias. 2. A survey paid for by makers of disposable diapers find that 84% of the sample oppose banning disposable diapers. Here's the actual question. It is estimated that disposable diapers account for less than 2% of the trash in today's landfills. In contrast, beverage containers, third-class mail, and yard waste is estimated to be about 21% of the landfills. Given this, in your opinion, would it be fair to ban disposable diapers? So in this question here, they're kind of leading their respondents to a certain answer. They want them to say no. And you can tell that because they're giving them this extra information that makes the position of the makers of disposable diapers, it makes their position look elevated. There's a note here that says, be careful with this. This survey means that they think diapers should be allowed to be disposable. So that extra information here is going to, since it's going to lead the responses, that's going to produce a bias. So do we think that 84% is less than, greater than, or equal to the true proportion, true percent of people who oppose banning disposable diapers? Well, 84% is probably greater than the true proportion or the true percent of the population. Now the wording of this question makes it sound like the diapers are not really a problem in the landfills and that the true problem in landfills is something else. In this case, beverage containers, third-class mail, and yard wastes. So leading questions like this, they are a form of response bias. Okay, everyone, that is it. That is all we have for today. It's a pretty short day, and you should be expecting a quiz probably on section 4.1 really soon. Have a great day, and we will see you next time on section 4.2.